right, let's dive into the deep end with the Chupacabra.
A creature, a legend, a myth, who knows?
Yeah, exactly. And that's what we're going to try and figure out today, right?
Right.
So for this deep dive, we've got eyewitness accounts, some folklore, some analysis, even some pop culture stuff.
It's interesting because it's a relatively new legend compared to something like, say, Bigfoot.
It really is. It
Yeah.
feels very modern, doesn't it? Like it's still evolving.
Yeah, it's like we're watching it happen.
But before we go too far, let's make sure everyone's on the same page.
Good, yeah.
When you hear a Chupacabra, what pops into your head?
Bloodsucker, livestock,
Yeah.
all those grainy pictures.
Exactly. And the descriptions, they're crazy. Reptilian kangaroo, hairless dog, you name it,
And the sightings, they're everywhere, aren't they? Not just one place.
all over the Americas. So how do we even begin to unravel this?
Well, our sources point us back to the 90s,
The 90s, okay.
Puerto Rico specifically,
Puerto Rico, I see.
with a woman named Madeline Tolentino.
Madeline Tolentino.
She gave a pretty detailed account.
Okay, lay it on us. What does she see?
5-foot-tall creature, glowing eyes, bat wings, spikes on its back, standing upright.
Ooh.
Oh, and it smelled like sulfur, she said.
Wow, that's a pretty vivid image.
It is. It definitely captured people's imaginations.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, that's the image that stuck, right?
It's a powerful image for sure. But we do have to be careful with eyewitness accounts.
Of course, yeah.
They can be unreliable, influenced by lots of things.
Like what?
Fear, lighting conditions, even things they've seen in movies.
Movies. That's interesting because one of our sources brought up a connection to a movie.
Oh yeah, which one?
Species.
Species. That's the one with that alien designed by H.R. Geiger, right?
Right.
Now that you mention it, there are some similarities.
So she saw this movie.
Not long before her sighting, yeah.
And are you saying that what she saw in the movie?
Maybe, just maybe, influenced how she perceived the Chupacabra.
Whoa. So pop culture, could it actually have shaped the Chupacabra myth?
It's a real possibility.
Our brains, they love making connections, don't they?
They do. It's how we make sense of the world. Sometimes those connections are not always accurate, though.
Okay, so we've got this possible pop culture influence, but then things start to change as the legend spreads to the mainland.
They do. The descriptions shift.
Right, it's not the 5-foot spiky bat-winged creature anymore.
Oh no, it becomes smaller, more canine-like.
And often hairless, right?
Hairless, that's a common description, and this is where things get interesting from a scientific standpoint.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
When researchers have had a chance to analyze alleged Chupacabra carcasses,
Yeah.
the DNA tells a very different story.
What do you mean?
It consistently points to animals we already know.
Like what? Give me an example.
Coyotes, dogs, sometimes canine hybrids, but there's a catch.
What's the catch?
Many of them show signs of a severe skin condition.
A skin condition.
Mange.
Hold on, you're telling me this terrifying monster, it might just be a sick dog.
It might sound a bit anticlimactic,
It kind of does.
but mange can be brutal.
What is mange exactly? I'm not really familiar with it.
It's caused by mites that burrow into the skin, leading to hair loss, lesions, thickening of the skin.
Oh, wow. That sounds awful.
It can make a canine look really, really monstrous, especially if you're already expecting to see something scary.
Right, so you're primed to see a monster, and suddenly a mangy coyote looks like the Chupacabra.
It's a classic case of misidentification.
Makes you wonder how much of what we see is what we expect to see, huh?
It really does. We fill in those blanks with our fears, with the stories we already know.
But even if it's just a case of mistaken identity, the Chupacabra has really captured our imaginations, hasn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
It's everywhere. Movies, TV shows, even documentaries.
And the media plays a huge role in all of this.
How so?
Think about those early descriptions. They were all over the place.
Right.
Fleeting glimpses, panicked accounts.
Yeah.
But once artists, filmmakers got a hold of it,
They gave it a face.
exactly. And suddenly everyone has a picture in their mind, even if it's not consistent.
So we latch on to that, even if it's not the real Chupacabra, whatever that is.
And those images, they're not coming from a vacuum. They're influenced by things.
Like what?
Monster movies, cultural anxieties, everything. Remember, this was the 90s?
Oh yeah, the 90s.
Aliens, conspiracies, it was all in the air.
Right. So the Chupacabra becomes this blank slate for all that.
A symbol of the unknown, the stuff that scares us.
We want explanations, and sometimes the explanation is a monster.
Exactly.
And as the legend spreads through different media, the interpretations keep evolving.
Oh, yeah.
We get the bloodthirsty predator, but then we get other things.
More creative interpretations, let's say.
Like that cuddly Chupacabra in the Netflix movie Chewy.
But yeah, that's a great example.
It's not scary anymore, it's marketable, it's for kids.
From monster to mascot.
It makes you think, does the Chupacabra even have a fixed form? Or is it just whatever we want it to be?
That's a really good question. We want to categorize things, define them, put them in boxes. But the ambiguity, that's part of what makes it so interesting, so compelling.
A reflection of our own fears and our imaginations.
Like a mirror, yeah.
And the media is constantly reframing that reflection.
Exactly. Take Chupa, for example.
Okay.
It reflects a broader trend, I think, moving away from the purely monstrous, the scary,
Towards something else.
the connection with nature, even if it's fantastical.
So not just a monster to be feared, but something we can understand, maybe even befriend.
It makes you wonder, how does this affect how we view nature, the unknown?
It's a big shift from fear to something else.
Worth paying attention to, that's for sure.
Okay, so we talked about misidentification, the media, even the Chupacabra getting a cuddly makeover. But the big question remains,
It's a big one, yeah.
is there any chance, any possibility, that there's a real undiscovered creature behind all of this?
Ah, the million-dollar question.
Right, and it's tempting to just say, sure, why not?
It is tempting. The mystery is alluring.
But we have to be careful.
Absolutely. We can't let the excitement cloud our judgment. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
And in the case of the Chupacabra,
The evidence just isn't there.
we've got a DNA analysis.
Right. Pointing to known animals,
Eyewitness accounts that could be explained by other things.
misidentification, hoaxes, even the influence of movies like Species.
It's like solving a puzzle. We've got all these pieces, and they seem strange at first.
But when you put them together, they point to something more down to earth.
But that doesn't make the Chupacabra any less fascinating, does it?
Not at all.
It's this global phenomenon.
It really is, capturing our imagination, sparking debate.
It shows how powerful these myths can be, even in our scientific world.
It speaks to something deeper, I think, something science can't fully explain.
We crave stories, we crave explanations.
And sometimes those explanations, they take the form of creatures lurking in the shadows.
The Chupacabra may not be a literal monster,
Maybe not.
but it tells us a lot about ourselves.
How we see the world, the stories we tell.
To explain the things we don't understand. You know, it's funny. We keep talking about the Chupacabra as this thing, this creature.
Yeah.
But what if that's not the real story?
What do you mean?
What if the real story is the myth itself?
The power of the story. Yeah, you see, even if there's no literal blood-sucking monster out there,
Right.
the legend, it still tells us something about us.
About how we think.
About how we try to explain the world around us.
So even if it's not real, it has a purpose.
It fills a need for explanation.
When we see something strange,
Something we can't explain, our minds, they want to make sense of it.
find a pattern, an answer.
And sometimes that answer, it comes in the form of a myth, a legend.
It brings order to the chaos.
Exactly.
But why monsters? Why are we so drawn to those stories?
I think it's about facing our fears, but in a safe way.
Like a controlled dose of fear,
Yeah, within a story, we can explore the dark side of things.
without actually being in danger.
It's a way to test our limits.
The Chupacabra, it's not an ancient myth, it's a modern creation.
It is. It appeared at a very specific time,
The 90s.
a time of a lot of anxiety.
Aliens, conspiracy,
Technology changing so fast.
and this creature, it kind of embodied all of that.
All those fears we couldn't put into words.
Right, like a symbol of the unknown.
Exactly.
But it also taps into something else, I think.
What's that?
Our fascination with nature, with the mystery of it all.
Ah, yeah, that sense of wonder.
Even in our scientific technological world, there's still so much we don't know.
And the Chupacabra, it reflects that, doesn't it?
How so?
Constantly changing descriptions, morphing, adapting.
Oh, you mean how it's different in every story?
It's like nature itself, wild and unpredictable.
And that brings us back to that shift we talked about,
From monster to something else.
from scary to cuddly.
It's like we're rethinking how we see the unknown, nature itself.
Moving away from fear.
Towards understanding, a connection.
So maybe the Chupacabra's transformation,
It's a reflection of our own transformation.
how we see the natural world,
From fear and exploitation.
to something more balanced,
Recognizing our connection to the planet,
and to all the creatures on it.
real or imagined.
We started this deep dive, looking for a monster.
Trying to find the truth behind the legend.
And maybe we didn't find a blood-sucking beast,
But we found something else.
Something more important.
The power of stories.
How our minds try to make sense of the world.
The mystery that surrounds us.
And how we're all connected to it.
It's a journey, the search for knowledge.
With twists and turns and surprises.
And sometimes the biggest surprise
is that we end up with more questions than answers.
Keep exploring, keep questioning, keep that wonder alive.
The world is full of mysteries, stories waiting to be told.
And maybe even a few monsters lurking in the shadows.
Real or imagined. Until next time, keep diving deep.